I mean, I think the biggest misconception actually is about ideas of competition. That museums in Asia are not wanting to necessarily compete with museums in the States or Europe. Actually, one of the foundational ideas, I think, and based on a series of forums that Asia Society initiated in India, bringing together museum directors from the US to go to India to talk to their counterparts a couple of years ago. And then last November, 15 American museum directors to go to Beijing, where a number of discussions were held about cultural exchange and collaboration. So what we find from these discussions is actually that there is a great deal of desire on the part of our counterparts in Asia to want to collaborate, whether that's through long-term loans, sharing exhibitions, sharing expertise, both ways. So I think that that's one of the greatest misconceptions, actually.
Yeah. I think it's an incredible eye-opener, seeing the way in which one can collaborate and seeing how people essentially feel the same way, that they want to build up these institutions, and there's a lot that we can share. And it's really a two-way process of sharing, because I think we come back enriched from that process too.
One of the most important things that we need to do is to develop a mechanism through which that a common platform that can be established for better mutual understandings. Yeah. To understand the commonality as well as to respect the differences.
Yeah.
And in that case, put people on the ground is extremely important. I believe that once the professionals get to meet each other, have a platform that can engage with each other in a meaningful way, then trust could be quickly established, and everything emanates from there.
We find ourselves in a position where there is much more of an interest in building a long-term partnership, which usually means an exchange of exhibitions or a staff exchange training, something like that, where there is much more of a balance or a sense of parity or reciprocity even to the relationship. I think that's one of the real game changers right now in terms of how we do business in Asia.
I think it also takes a lot of institutional commitment when we are talking about either with audience development, in these big areas where these kind of shows are slightly new, but also the institutional commitment that is taken with projects that are looking at long-term relationships with certain countries. So I think because this is such a kind of new area, it's resulting in museums really having to dig deep and decide that this is a commitment that they are willing to take on. Yeah. The engagement of different, diverse audiences is not something that's going to happen just with one show.
So you're saying that directors like these three people next to you have to make commitments without the business model driving the assumption, and that building an audience is the goal, not serving an audience.
Yes, and you really have to take a long-term perspective on it.
Yeah.
But you can certainly see, for example, in the State Department's Art in Embassies program, a major shift. And this is a program for putting art in embassies and consulates around the world. And of course, with the huge rebuilding program, the commissioning of art has burgeoned. The difference is that they are no longer just commissioning American artists for works, they're actually commissioning local artists as well. So that's actually created, I think, a very healthy new environment.
I think that other countries who have ministries of culture do not understand the fact that the US doesn't have one. And so when we're talking about the fact, when we're trying to negotiate, and coming back to the problems of working with different types of countries, regardless of whether they're centralized or democracies, there is a certain structure through which you're expected to put your proposals forward. And the fact that not only do we not have that structure, but we're actually left on our own to negotiate it, does sometimes cause problems.
There's been a game changer in Asia in terms of new wealth, and that's not just new private wealth, but governments in Asia really interested in culture, and we may say it's a form of soft power or not, but at the time when we used to go and do loan shows with China, just by way of example, it would be our responsibility to pay loan fees, to pay all the costs associated with these kinds of shows. Now, if you engage in a partnership, it is a completely different cost-sharing scenario. So it's much more equitable in that sense too. And I actually think much more, many more people in Asia are interested in showing their cultural artifacts or their contemporary art here in the US. And so you have a growing kind of funder base rather than a diminishing one.